Have you ever stopped to think that there's an entire country that technically shouldn't exist? While most people worry about their basement flooding, imagine living in a nation where 2/3 of the territory sits below sea level, and 17 million people call it home. Here's the shocking truth that the tourism industry doesn't want you to know: Holland, that country of tulips and windmills that seems like a fairy tale, is literally fighting a silent war against extinction. Actually, what you're about to discover will shatter everything you thought you knew about modern civilization and survival. Here's a statement that goes against everything you've learned: the world's most developed and safe countries might be living a dangerous illusion. The thing is, while we obsess over wars, economy, and politics, there's an epic battle happening right under our noses, and Holland is at the epicenter of this fight that will decide humanity's future. But hold on, because this isn't just about floods and dikes anymore. This is the real story of how an entire country became hostage to its own achievements, and why understanding their desperate situation might be the key to your own survival in the coming decades. Well, if you want to discover the most shocking curiosities about Geographia that nobody tells you, and how an apparently prosperous nation transformed into a survival laboratory for the entire human species, then you need to hear this story to the end. Because what's happening in Holland today might be coming to your neighborhood sooner than you think. Picture this for a moment: living in a land where the ocean literally knocks on your front door every single day. Well, that's been the Dutch reality for over 1,000 years. One of the most fascinating curiosities about Dutch Geographia is that 2/3 of the country sits below sea level. It's like an entire nation decided to live in the world's basement, defying nature's laws. The Dutch ancestors had no choice: fight the sea or simply vanish from the map. The thing is, when you're born in a land that should technically be underwater, you develop a unique mindset. Early inhabitants started building small earth mounds called terps, where they'd construct their homes like tiny islands of hope. Honestly, it's mind-blowing to think that entire families lived on these artificial oases, surrounded by water on all sides. This peculiar Geographia forced the Dutch to become masters of hydraulic engineering long before any university taught such things. The curiosities geographicas of this country are so numerous that every square meter tells a survival story. But here's the kicker: this battle against the sea wasn't just about physical survival. It was about forging an entire people's character. The Dutch developed a unique philosophy: God created the earth, but the Dutch created Holland. Actually, this phrase perfectly captures how they transformed a geographical disadvantage into a cultural advantage. Every storm, every high tide, every flood was an engineering lesson they absorbed like sponges. And it was precisely this constant need for innovation that planted the seeds for something even more magnificent. You know what's absolutely mind-blowing? The Dutch didn't just survive the water threat, they literally redesigned their entire country. The dike system they created is one of the world's greatest engineering curiosities. Picture this: giant walls of earth and stone stretching for thousands of kilometers, like protective armor around entire cities. Actually, if you flew over Holland today, you'd see that the entire Geographia was artificially shaped by these impressive structures. It's like the Dutch told the ocean, "Not today, buddy." But here's where it gets really interesting: these dikes weren't just defensive barriers. They became the backbone of a complex system that included windmills, canals, and locks. Those famous Dutch windmills, which are tourist postcards today, were actually war machines against water. Well, technically they pumped water from polders, reclaimed lands, back to the sea. The curiosities geographicas multiply when you realize each windmill was strategically positioned as part of a gigantic network. Honestly, it's like a national-scale chess game, where each piece had a specific purpose in the battle against the waters. The thing is, this revolutionary engineering didn't happen overnight. It took centuries of trial and error, of disasters that taught valuable lessons. For instance, the Great Flood of 1421 destroyed 72 villages and killed thousands, but also taught the Dutch they needed something more sophisticated than simple earth walls. Actually, each tragedy became a laboratory for innovations that still influence world engineering today. The curiosities about how they transformed catastrophes into knowledge are fascinating, but all this expertise would create a completely new problem, and a much more ambitious one. Here's where things get absolutely crazy. The Dutch weren't content with just defending themselves from the sea. They decided to steal land from it. Actually, one of the most impressive curiosities of Dutch geography is that about 26% of the country simply didn't exist a few centuries ago. Just imagine, entire cities, airports, farms, and even the famous Schiphol airport are built on lands that used to be the ocean floor. It's like they said, you know what? We need more space, so let's just create it. The polders, these artificial lands created by draining flooded areas, transformed Holland into an agricultural and economic powerhouse. But hold on, this ambition had a price that nobody calculated properly at the time. The thing is, when you remove water from naturally flooded areas, the land starts sinking. It's like deflating a giant waterbed. The curiosities Geographicas become worrying when you discover that some polder areas are sinking up to 2 centimeters per year. Amsterdam, for example, is literally descending toward the Earth's center. Well, technically it's not that dramatic, but you get the point. The Dutch created a land subsidence problem that persists today, requiring constant water pumping and expensive dike maintenance. Actually, here's the kicker. This massive creation of artificial lands also destroyed entire ecosystems that had existed for millennia. Wetlands that served as natural nurseries for fish, migratory birds, and unique plants simply vanished from the map. The curiosities about lost biodiversity are heartbreaking. Species that took millions of years to evolve were extinct in decades. It's like erasing entire pages from nature's book. But wait, because this radical transformation of Dutch geography was just beginning to show its most dramatic consequences. The planet's climate had other plans for this conquered land. Plot twist, after centuries fighting the sea, the Dutch discovered the battle was just beginning. Climate change transformed that ancient struggle into an epic-scale war. Actually, one of the most alarming curiosities about current Dutch geography is that sea level is rising 3 times faster than the global average. It's like nature decided to hit the fast-forward button just when they thought they had everything under control. Dutch scientists calculate that by 2100, sea level could rise between 65 to 130 centimeters. For a country already living below sea level, this isn't just concerning, it's potentially catastrophic. But here's where it gets really scary. It's not just the gradual rise that worries them. Storms are getting more intense and frequent, creating storm surges that can overcome even the most modern dikes. Well, remember that the Dutch always adapted to threats, but this time it's different. The curiosities Geographicas become frightening statistics. During the 1953 storm, over 1,800 people died when dikes broke. Actually, imagine if a similar storm happened today, with sea level already higher and cities denser. Warning and evacuation systems have improved drastically, but basic physics remains relentless. Water always finds its way. The thing is, the Dutch aren't just waiting for the worst to happen. They're spending billions on projects like the famous Maaslandkering, gigantic floating barriers that automatically close during storms. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie. The curiosities about these megastructures are fascinating. They're so large that ships can pass underneath when open, but when closed, they create an impenetrable wall against tsunamis and storm surges. But even with all this high-tech wizardry, there's an even bigger problem forming on the horizon, and this time, it's not just about water. Here's the mind-bending reality: while fighting rising seas, the Dutch are simultaneously dealing with one of the world's highest population densities. Actually, one of the most impressive curiosities about Dutch geography is that they managed to fit 17.4 million people in a territory smaller than West Virginia. It's like trying to fit an entire stadium worth of people into your living room. With 508 people per square kilometer, Holland is denser than countries like Bangladesh and South Korea. Well, imagine the pressure this puts on every square meter of land they fought so hard to create and protect from the sea. Every new house, every road, Every shopping mall represents a monumental decision about how to use this precious, artificially created space. But wait, it gets even more complex. These 17.4 million people aren't evenly distributed across the country. The thing is, most of the population concentrates in the Randstad, a megalopolis that includes Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, and Utrecht. The curiositats geographicas of this region are surreal. You can literally walk from one city to another without noticing where one ends and the other begins. Actually, this urban concentration creates unsustainable pressure on infrastructure. Trains are overcrowded, roads congested, and finding a house to buy or rent has become a true mission impossible. It's like trying to find a parking spot at the mall on Christmas Eve, except every day. Now here's the kicker, this overpopulation isn't just a social problem, it's a matter of national survival. When you have millions of people living below sea level, every emergency becomes exponentially more dangerous. Well, think about it, evacuating a city of 100,000 people is already complicated. Imagine evacuating 8 million from Amsterdam's metropolitan area during a storm. The curiositats about emergency logistics are frightening. They need detailed plans on how to move entire populations within hours. But here's where things get really interesting, because this population pressure is forcing the Dutch to completely rethink not just where they live, but how they'll live in the future. Here's where the story gets absolutely insane. The Dutch are facing modern history's cruelest dilemma, choosing between saving the planet or saving themselves. Actually, one of the most paradoxical curiositats of Dutch geographia is that they're simultaneously leaders in renewable energy and one of Europe's highest CO2 emitters per capita. It's like being the doctor who smokes while operating on a lung cancer patient. They know they need to drastically reduce emissions to combat climate change, but they also need massive energy to keep pumps running 24/7, preventing the country from simply disappearing underwater. Well, imagine the psychological pressure of knowing that every energy saving could literally cost lives. But here's the brutal truth, sustainability has become an existential question for the Dutch in a way no other country experiences. The thing is, they're pioneering solutions that seem straight out of sci-fi movies, floating houses that rise with sea level, vertical farms in skyscrapers, and even plans to create sponge cities that absorb water like living organisms. The curiositats geographicas of the future include entire neighborhoods designed to float during floods. Actually, in Rotterdam there are already parks that function as giant reservoirs during storms. It's like the entire city is an adaptive organism, breathing along with the tides. Now here's the mind-blowing part, this survival struggle is transforming Holland into humanity's future laboratory. Well, think about it. If they can solve the puzzle of living sustainably below sea level, with high population density and extreme climate change, they'll have created the 21st century survival manual. The curiositats about Dutch innovation are shaping public policies worldwide, from Singapore to Miami. Actually, coastal cities globally are copying Dutch solutions because they know that what happens in Holland today might be the fate of billions of people tomorrow. But the ultimate question remains, will this extraordinary human ingenuity manage to defeat nature's relentless forces, or will Holland really become the first developed country to completely succumb to climate change? So here's the million-dollar question that should keep you awake at night. If one of the world's most advanced nations is struggling this desperately against nature's forces, what does that say about the rest of us? The thing is, the Dutch aren't just victims of circumstances, they're the canaries in the coal mine for our entire planet. Miami, New York, Bangkok, Venice, they're all watching Holland like their lives depend on it. Because honestly, they do. But here's what really matters, are you going to sit there passively while the world changes drastically around you, or will you start preparing for what's coming? Climate change is about to give all of us the same ultimatum the Dutch faced, innovate or die. What are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you research which areas are safe from rising seas? Will you learn from Holland's mistakes before it's too late? Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to keep learning about the geographic curiositats that really matter for your future. Because the next story might be about your own backyard.